If you love podcasting as much as Erica and I do, you may be considering starting your own. Starting a podcast has been one of the best decisions we have ever made, but getting started can feel overwhelming. Buzzsprout is the easiest and most professional way to start a podcast. Buzzsprout has helped over 100,000 people launch their own, including us. Buzzsprout will launch your show on all of the major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Play, to name a few. You also get a podcast website, audio players that can be dropped into other websites, and stats of who is listening, and so much more. Buzzsprout also publishes blog posts, podcasts, and YouTube videos every week. They are a great tool and have useful information from expert podcasters. To start your own podcast and get a $20 Amazon gift card, follow the link in our show notes. This lets Buzzsprout know that we sent you, and it supports our show. Buzzsprout, the easiest way to start a podcast.
Crime, Wine, and Chaos contains adult language and graphic content. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey listeners, I'm Amber.
And I'm Michael, and this is Crime, Wine, and Chaos.
Hello, Michael. This is Michael Manfred, the Michael Manfred that is heard in the background on the podcast every episode.
Not every episode.
Just about every episode. I fucking forget something, and I'm texting you from in here to bring me my purse, my wine, my water.
It's wine every time.
It's okay. Well,
bottle number 2, please.
Shit's getting real in here. I'm going to need another bottle. And now you're actually sitting at the pod desk in front of the mic.
Yes.
And I am stoked. Instead of just in the background, I'm stoked that you're here.
I'm happy to be here. I thank you for having me.
Of course. Let's see. Michael and I have known each other since high school. He is my partner. He is my bestie. God, what else? You're a father to an amazing human who, again, did our album art for Tinfoil Top Hat, the new EP, Complicated Allies. Check that out on Spotify. He also owns a business, Mullins Construction Group. You are a contractor. You make beautiful, beautiful, beautiful fucking shit. And
thank you.
I could go on and on and on.
Keep going.
Okay.
Don't stop there.
He's
just
devilishly handsome.
There we go. That's all I needed. Thank you.
He makes me laugh.
This is a podcast,
constantly.
Right? They have no idea what I look like. Brilliant.
Oh, there's pictures, honey. There's pictures, and people know what you look like.
All right.
It's okay.
Fair enough.
Anything? Did I leave anything out?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
That sums you up.
Once you got the devilishly handsome in there, then I think, we covered it.
Okay, if this was your obituary.
Devilishly handsome has to be in there.
Okay, devilishly handsome, business owner, father, brother. Your brother is fucking amazing.
Yeah, he's amazing.
God, what else? Did I do okay on the obit?
The obit?
That's what this is now.
Before I even started my story, this is your obituary. This is the last thing you do. He was found dead in the podcast room directly after doing his first podcast with said host.
I'm Crime next week, and you are my story. Plot twist.
Nobody's expecting that at all. On episode 100, Amber kills her partner.
Her partner. In a fit of rage.
Brilliant.
Never. Oh my God, never. Well, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking La Crema Purpura. I'm sure I pronounced that correctly.
Of course, nailed it.
Nailed it.
Is it delish?
So far so good.
It's a red, which is usually my preference, but it's so fucking hot in here that I chilled a white, and I'm drinking a white. I'm drinking Moco Velho, a white wine of Spain. It is delicious.
Wait, I have to stop you here.
Okay.
How do we just kind of cruise right past it's getting hot in here without you going into some sort of interlude of a song? I mean, everything's a song, right?
Yes, my life is a musical.
Yes, wonderful. All right, so we don't do that here. Okay.
No, don't worry. Don't worry.
All right, there's some singing going on.
Oh, there's always a little bit of singing.
Good.
Mm-hmm. How was your week? What have you been doing?
I've been working. I've been researching this story that I'm going to be presenting to you here shortly, and I'm learning that I don't have green eyes.
Oh, honey, no, you don't.
I know. Well, I'm basically today years old when I found out that my eyes have been blue my entire life.
Your whole life is a lie.
My whole life is a lie. Well, my ID says I have green eyes. Uh-huh. My little me characters on the Wii had green eyes. My avatars have green eyes.
Do you wish you had green eyes? Is that what is happening? Are you trying to manifest green eyes?
I don't know.
Do you prefer green eyes?
I don't know. I kind of like the idea of blue eyes.
Okay, well, good, because
like
that's
a new me.
what you have. It's basically like you just got contacts. Colored contacts, only everybody always knew that you had blue eyes except for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, welcome to the party, Michael. All right. So, but yeah, that's the big revelation of my week.
Wow. Was your mind blown?
Yeah, I still is a little bit. Like,
Really?
I still think of myself as having green eyes. Although I still think of myself as having hair, and I haven't had hair since I was in high school. So, I mean, I don't know.
Oh, honey. Well,
there it is.
We all hold on to things for all kinds of reasons.
There's one.
If you want me to call you my green-eyed partner, I will. I'll do that for you.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to run my fingers through your phantom hair? I will.
Okay, no, 'cause that's depressing. All right, let's not, a little too close to home.
Okay.
So how about you? How's your week been? What's new with you?
What's new with me is I'm currently learning the mandolin.
Crushing the mandolin.
Okay, I appreciate that. Also, you have to live in the same house as me and hear listen, I had children who played, I mean, nothing is as bad as orchestra, where it just sounds like god-awful noise. So I'm imagining that's what I'm doing to the people in my home right now while I practice.
Absolutely not.
Stop it. That is your liar face.
That is...
I know your liar face. But you know what? It's exciting because I've never played an instrument, and what an obscure one to pick.
Well, I mean, you always want to play the guitar, and it's like a mini guitar.
It is a mini guitar. It's much more suited to my tiny hands.
That makes sense.
It's much easier for me. Mm-hmm. And, they're cheaper. I mean, now I just have a guitar that wasn't cheap, whatever. It's fine. This is fine. I'll find a use for it. Maybe once you master an easier stringed instrument, the guitar will come a little easier for me. Not natural, but easier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of...
We're rolling with that until it's proven otherwise.
You have a lot of terrible practice to be listening to, so I apologize for that.
That's all right.
All right. Okay. Well, you've got the patience of a saint. So, you've got crime this week. Do you have a crime for me?
I do. I have a lot of crimes, actually.
Oh, shit.
Well, one guy that's committing a lot of crimes.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
So, my story is on Frank Abagnale Jr. He is considered one of the most successful con men in real life in the world. He is the topic of the movie Catch Me If You Can. If you've seen it, you've seen it. I made you watch it.
I love, you know what? Okay, yeah. We'll debrief later about us watching that movie together because I fucking loved it, and yeah, I have things to contribute about that. Okay.
Well,
perfect.
we'll probably get to this.
We'll get to it.
Topic of that movie. I mean, and so Leonardo DiCaprio plays him. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, I wouldn't be mad about that.
No worries. But so this guy's got a pretty extensive resume. And he's got several resumes. But let's start with, quickly, that movie, which was based on a book that he wrote, which turned into a Tony Award-winning musical, and then a show on USA for 6 seasons called White Collar. Shit. He's authored 4 other books since the movie was released on fraud and crime and prevention and all the things. Mm-hmm. And so that's, one of his resumes.
Okay, is that the real one, or is that...
that is real.
Okay, great.
All of those things are real.
Okay.
Now, remember, we're talking about a con man here.
Sure.
So, the details are a little sketchy throughout. What do we know? We don't know what we don't know.
Right.
So, throughout my research, I really thought I was going to be sort of debunking the con man thing, or that somebody has, and I was right. Several people have spent countless hours debunking all of his stories that led to the... writing of the book and all the things, and I'll talk about all that later. But, at this point, in 2022, and so for the last 45 years, he's been telling the same story that was in the movie over and over and over again. Oh, God. And he was invited to do a Talks at Google lecture back in 2017, but sort of just a quick rundown of sort of his exploits from his mouth. And this is as recent as just a few years ago. So, born in 1948, grew up in Westchester County, New York. He clarifies that unlike the movie where he was a single child, he is the middle child of 4 children. He had 2 brothers and a sister. He says he went to an Irish Catholic school. His parents were divorced at 16, and this all tracks really closely with the movie.
Okay.
After that, he took various part-time jobs within New York and said it couldn't pay him enough money, so he decided to kind of fudge his ID, to make himself 10 years older, and he got paid a little more, but that wasn't enough. And so that's when he got the idea of getting a Pan Am uniform, faking an aviation badge, and cashing bad checks everywhere. And from his youth, he was cashing bad checks early on, but this was a way to sort of look more impressive, if you will.
Sure.
Right? So that was his motivation, as he says.
Okay.
But with that uniform, he was able to board, according to Pan Am Airlines, over 260 flights, fly over 1 million miles for free as a deadhead. He later worked as a doctor. He passed the bar exam in Louisiana, worked for an attorney general in the civil division of the state court. He was only arrested once in a small town in France, which you saw in the movie. And he said he served 4 years of his 12-year sentence in federal prison, only to be paroled and work for the FBI for the last 41 years. He says he's turned down pardons from 3 sitting presidents.
He's turned down pardons?
Turned down pardons from 3 presidents. And so, and he claims, like, a piece of paper can't undo the harm that I've caused.
Well, and if you're already working for the FBI, like, really that's the motivation for people to have their record sealed or pardoned or whatever.
I can't get a job.
He's working for, like, the most powerful agency in the world, so how is his record hindering him?
Right. And he's giving lectures, and it's sort of the mystique of everything.
Sure.
If he's pardoned, he's no longer a con man. He's just a guy that did some shit.
That's right.
So he goes on in that lecture to say, he's got a moral to his story, be a good dad and all that. He's got 3 children, all who have graduated from college and done amazing things. He's been married to his wife, Kellyanne Welbs, for 45 years and on and on and on. And so that is the story as he still tells it today. And it's pretty close to the movie, actually.
Okay.
He clarifies a couple things like, some people have written that I've had $8 million of fraudulent checks. It's only $2.5 million, he says. And he plays it down. Okay. So anyway, so good stuff. The
weirdest thing that stood out to me in the reality versus the movie was that he was not an only child and that he was actually the middle child, because this behavior is, I'm going to be a psychologist for a second because I love to do that. That is not middle child behavior. As a middle child, we just fucking lay low. You don't rock the boat, you keep quiet, you stay peaceful, you fucking lay low. That is some odd behavior from a middle child to be that fucking over the top with his behavior.
If you think that's odd, wait until you see everything else.
Okay.
So like I said at the beginning, like I thought I was going to be sort of debunking the myth of Frank Abagnale Jr. and all the things. And it turns out recently, just in 2020, an author by the name of Alan C. Logan spent an extensive amount of time basically just ripping everything apart.
Oh, shit.
And wrote a book called The Greatest Hoax on Earth. And I listened to a podcast he was on, Most Notorious, where he was interviewed about the book and about his research, and it's pretty amazing. So he's done a lot of work. There's another podcast called Pretend with host Javier Leiva. I listened to a lot of that. He did independent verification of everything that Alan researched, and so basically, as Javier Leiva says, 90% of everything that he's ever said is a lie.
Holy shit.
90%. But it's like every con, every lie is always based on a little bit of truth. And it's sort of the fun part, I think, for this is like, what was the truth that sort of led to that story? So, shall we?
We shall. And also, I would have a hard time keeping my lies straight.
Oh, and so that's the thing. And so when I was listening to the talks at Google, and I listened to probably at least 12 different lectures, him on Johnny Carson, him on To Tell the Truth, he tells the same story every time for like the last 40-something years. And too good. It's the same every time.
It's rehearsed.
It's so rehearsed,
Okay.
It's ridiculous.
Oh my God.
The same jokes, the same pauses, the same things over and over and over again. It was like on repeat. So, and even if somebody asked him a question, he would find a spot in his story to get into and start telling his story exactly like that.
Interesting. So this is his shtick.
That's his shtick.
Okay. I can't wait to hear. Okay.
All right. So some of the, let's go through some of the claims like I just listed. So first of all, he's cashed $2.5 million in fraudulent checks. Now keep in mind, so that was back in like the late 60s.
Shit.
So the GoogleNet says that with inflation, that's 8 times more. So we're talking, what is that, $20 million in fraudulent checks in today's money?
Shit.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. So that doesn't, fly under the radar soups easy.
No.
People notice when you do that. Apparently there's only 10 Pan Am fake fraudulent checks. And it's like $1,500.
Really?
Yeah, they have this little logo on the top like he does in the movie and all that.
Right.
$1,500.
Okay.
Now, he did cash a lot of fake checks, but the estimates are vary, but I mean, probably the estimate that made the most sense to me is somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000 in checks.
Okay.
Ever.
Yeah, because part of the whole thing in the movie was that he was faking payroll checks from a very high-end company.
Oh, yeah. So,
right?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
Probably not true.
Okay.
But, I mean, so he did a little bit, and then he just exaggerated the amount, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So he can write fraudulent checks. So he also, of course, that I think one of the more James Bondy sort of, flying around the world, being a jet setter, but flying for free, visiting over 80 countries, 260 flights, 1 million miles, right? And that's Pan Am's estimate. So there's so many points in this story, too, in real life where, like, Pan Am is like, yeah, he probably did this many trips, this many miles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like kind of playing into him. It probably wasn't that many. It's probably like 80 or 50.
Yeah.
But he clearly did it, right? He found a way onto these planes and all the things.
Shit.
So, yeah, and I mean, not to get too deep into the weeds, but like instead of it being Pan Am, it was TWA at first, and later on it turned into Pan Am and all these things. But there's some truth to it all. I mean, he did go on there. I mean, he was known by stewardesses, which we'll get to later. So then, of course, he was a pediatrician at Atlanta Hospital for a year in charge of residents.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is one of the more terrifying aspects of the whole thing. It's like, are we practicing medicine? But, I mean, so, yeah, in the movie, he was just, kind of keeping track of residents and that sort of thing. And he says that, it depends on which version of the story he tells, but that's essentially what happened. And, his length of time is anywhere from 2 weeks to a year, depending on which interview he was giving or which lecture he was giving.
That's a huge difference, but okay.
Whatevs. I mean, he's the con. You can't keep all this shit straight. I mean, but, I think likely he probably was in a hospital for a little bit. He definitely was in Georgia on several occasions. I mean, he tells a story of living... so how did you become a physician, they ask. And so his story is he went to a singles complex in Georgia, Riverbend Apartments, and didn't want to put an airline pilot down, so he put down physician because that sounded respectable. Because it was a singles complex, he felt like saying that he was a pediatrician would be something that they wouldn't understand. It turns out there's a doctor that lives in the complex who befriends him and all the things. And so through him, gets a job at the hospital. And he tells a story, and I think that this is sort of, for me, where my view of Frank Abagnale starts to change a little bit. So he tells a story on so many of his lectures that is, it always gets a round of applause, but it's like, He says some people would ask him to take a look at their conditions, and he would turn them away. But if a female asked him to give him an examination, he would be sure to give a thorough one.
He
says,
fucking
I was young, but not
shit.
dumb. And ha 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 ha. Is the laugh every time. But so that's like sort of the first thing. It's like, okay, so that's kind of creepy, dude.
Yeah, that's really creepy. What a fucking
But it's a
piece
laugh
of
for
shit.
him every time. I mean, I don't know.
A laugh of all the men in the audience?
Well, I mean, yeah, probably. But even then. So that's that whole thing. On to the love story of the movie, Brenda, the nurse at the hospital, where he falls in love. And
Brenda with braces. Yeah.
And falls in love with her and goes down to Louisiana, asks for her hand in marriage. Her father is a lawyer, and that's where he goes and studies for the bar and works under him. In real life, there is no Brenda. There's not a nurse, but there is a flight attendant named Paula Parks.
Okay.
And the story goes a little different. It wasn't exactly Brenda falling in love with the doctor who's so charming. It's Frank Abagnale actually sort of stalking Paula Parks and meets her on a flight that he deadheads on.
Holy shit.
Insists persistently to go out to dinner during the whole flight, and so she says only with a friend. And this is the subject of, I guess the main subject of the book, The Greatest Hoax on Earth, is sort of revolving around the people who he really truly affected, and Paula Parks and her family being one of them. And so, so super creepy. Ends up finding out where she's going to be traveling to, and is always there.
Oh my God.
She arrives. I know.
So these aren't victimless crimes.
Well, not necessarily. So this goes on for a couple weeks, and ends a flight in like Atlanta or something, and says, no, I don't want to go on a date with you. She's just really not interested in this guy, really turned off by him. And says that she's going to head down to spend time with her family in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge.
Shit.
And he insists on driving her.
Uh-huh.
And is able to convince her to do that. And she's thinking this is a great opportunity to really explain to him how uninterested that she is. Now they make it down to her home and where he meets her parents, and they fall in love with him. They think he's so charming and so wonderful, and she is putting the brakes on all of that as quickly as she can, but they won't have anything of it. They love him. They think he's great. They think he's the best thing. And so after a few days there, Paula's mom sort of, and we've all done this. Next time you're in town, look us up.
Yeah.
Well, she says, hey, next time you're in town, I'll teach you how to go fishing. You seem to know how to do so many other things. You don't know how to fish, I'll teach you how to go fishing. So Paula leaves. She goes on a flight, and she's out of town. A couple days later, he shows up and says, I'm here for the fishing lessons.
Oh, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
For the fishing lessons.
Yeah.
My God.
But they love this guy. They think he's great, so they invite him into their home, and he's staying there for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I think this is where it gets creepy again. So he's staying there, but he's staying in Paula's childhood bedroom.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
That's a violation.
That's a violation.
Yeah.
But so you imagine Paula, who's calls her parents and is like, oh, yeah, so your friend Frank is still here. He came back and he's staying with us. Oh, where's he staying? In your room.
Oh, my God. Your stalker's still here. We took him fishing.
Yeah, we took him
fishing. What the fuck?
Yeah. But they love him. And so he's taking them out to dinner, buying the mother flowers for the gratitude of staying there, all the things. Well, it turns out all that money was their money. He was paying for dinner on their dime, stealing their blank checks. And yeah, so
what an asshole!
What an asshole thing.
God.
Well, at this point, they don't know that that's what's going on, and he says he wants to go work with children.
Oh, that sounds like a good idea.
At this point, what else are you gonna do? He's been a pediatrician. He might as well work with children. So he gets hooked up with a local reverend while he's down there, and he tells him that he has a degree as a social worker.
Oh, now he's a social worker.
As a master, yeah, of course.
Okay, perfect.
And so he gets hooked up with a job in social work, and they very quickly find out that he doesn't know shit about shit when it comes to social work. So they call the reverend and like, where'd you meet this guy? Like, what's up with this guy? Mm-hmm. And about that time, Paula's parents are finding out and figuring out that money has been stolen from them, and he's picked up in Georgia and is sentenced to 12 years.
Holy shit.
In Atlanta Federal Prison. And so remember this. So in the movie, he's done all of these amazing things before the age of 19. All right, keep that in mind. We'll circle back to that later.
Okay.
And of course, he was only arrested once.
Sure.
When he was in France, because he's so slippery.
Of course, because catch me if you can. The 12 years was for stealing Paula's parents' money?
$1,200 in checks.
Okay.
So if 12 years equals $1,200 in checks, or $1,200 in checks equals 12 years, $2.5 million, I feel like should be way more than 12 years as he's claimed at other places. But so he's sentenced to 12 years in Atlanta Federal Prison. So the whole time while he's waiting for his sentencing, he's writing the Reverend, and he's befriending him. And he says, all I need is psychiatric help and, another chance at life and all this and all this. And so the Reverend writes a very compelling letter and is able to get him off as with probation and 12 years probation and psychiatric treatment.
Okay.
Well, and I think at this point, psychiatric treatment makes sense.
Yeah, he needs a social worker.
He probably needs a social worker. So, as you can guess, he didn't stick around and get the psychiatric treatment.
No.
He had shit to do.
Yeah.
He had shit to do.
He is a psychiatrist. I mean, please.
All right. Well, and so, he had many escapes from prison that he claims, including an Atlanta prison. So, he kind of escaped prison.
What?
Well, you think about it. So, he was supposed to spend 12 years in prison.
Oh, okay. He dodged it.
He dodged it. So, that's an escape from prison. So, it's like, you know what I mean? So I think that's where escape from prison, because he claims to be the youngest and only person to ever escape from this prison in Atlanta.
Oh, he's making it sound like he's digging a fucking tunnel, and all he got was a lean sentence.
Right.
But that's not an escape, Frank.
Well, I mean, as he tells it, the youngest and only person to ever escape prison.
And how do Paula's parents feel about him not being sentenced after they did that? He did that to them. That's kind of shitty.
I haven't read the book.
Oh, sorry.
But,
you're supposed to know everything.
Well, I mean, if you do want to know that, because the main focus of the book is the victims in Alan C. Logan's book. So if you are interested in that, and he does a deep dive on all the things, I listened to an interview that he did, and it's in depth.
Wow. Okay.
So, but yeah, follow down that rabbit hole. There's a rabbit hole.
My point is, like,
that's got to feel.
I'm pretty anti-prison, but sometimes that's got to feel really shitty when you're the victim. Like, literally, people are just allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And there's not any real significant punishment. And
I think one of the main punishments that is for Paula's mom, who completely trusted this guy.
Yeah, she taught him to fish.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
You teach a man to fish, and he's going to eat for the rest of his life, or something like that.
Eat her food for the rest of his life, apparently.
So her thing is that she just never trusted anybody the same again.
Yes.
So her innocence was lost.
Yeah.
And
and how she moves through the world and establishing new friendships is probably a fucking no-go for her. Like, that's damaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was his escape from prison.
Okay,
as I
job.
see it. That's my take on it. Nobody else has said that. But that's what I'm saying, goddamn.
I'm going to credit that to his attorney, not him, but okay.
Well, and that reverend, for goodness sake. So as in the movie, while he's in Louisiana, he's supposed to be passing a bar examination or working as an attorney general, which of course doesn't really happen. In the movie, Tom Hanks' character, Carl Hanratty, keeps saying, "How'd you do it, Frank? How'd you do it? How'd you pass the bar exam?" And he says, "Well, I studied really hard. And, on the third try, I got it." And that's what he's the same story he's been telling in his lectures over the years. He says he's got a photographic memory. He studied for 3 months. He attempted to take it on. Well, he passed on his third try. He's got an IQ over 140. He's just so fucking smart. He can't not pass it.
Okay.
That's his claim. So there was a researcher back in the late 70s who heard this and was like, bullshit. And interviewed everybody there, basically debunked it. They're like, we never met anybody that even sounds like this guy or looks like this guy or anything. And the National Enquirer was going to do a piece on him, and the assistant attorney general down there said, just ask what the attorney general looks like. And what floor is it building on? Like really easy questions.
Yeah.
If you spent a year there working, you would know these things.
Yeah.
And so he asked him about, they do this interview, and he mispronounces his name. He says he's a tall, slender man, and he's like 5'6" or 5'5" or something, and portly. And so completely, he's like, well, I don't know. But that doesn't really matter. None of this seems to matter. Nobody cares. They just are so enamored by the story.
Of course,
none of this matters. Anyway, so obviously that didn't happen, but he still tells that story to this day. I mean, there's another researcher who said that they met somebody who said they graduated from Harvard and did meet somebody that maybe was Frank, but kind of he didn't understand all the social things that were going on at Harvard at the time. Didn't know anything about law, and kind of was catching on to him. Put in a call to Harvard, kind of debunked his own little thing, and he had a family member missing in the family or something, and he disappears. So that was another story, but nonetheless, it doesn't seem like he probably did that. But
shit.
It's hard to know because he was using aliases this whole time. So not in the movie, but in his book and in many of his lectures, he says he was a professor of psychology at BYU for 2 semesters. There's no record of this, and when pressed on it back in 2000, right around the release of the movie, finally says, well, maybe I was a guest lecturer. So, but he'd been telling that story for 20 years at that point.
Oh my God, that's like calling yourself doctor because you got the honorary PhD.
Right.
Well, I was just a guest lecturer.
Pretty much.
Okay, but that's not even the same.
It's in line with everything else, though. As, he has a little taste of something and completely
and he expands on it. Yeah.
Why not? So going back to so of course he claimed he was only arrested once. That's not true. In fact, the whole movie happens from the time he was 15 to 19 years old. Well, that doesn't really align with reality because he actually wasn't that good of a criminal. Back when he was 17 years old, he was arrested for car theft. He's actually been arrested half a dozen or more times. He spent 3 years in a correctional facility in Great Meadows, New York, was paroled after 2 years, is out for a week, goes to Boston, gets arrested, spends 4 months in prison or in jail there. That undoes his parole. He goes back to Great Meadows. 3 weeks later, he does this TSA thing. He's literally, every time he's released from prison, it's weeks or months before he's rearrested or something.
God.
So The entire time that all of these escapades were supposed to be happening, he was in Great Meadows Correctional Facility in New York until the age of 20.
Oh.
So none of that, timeline-wise, ever happened.
Jesus
Little
Christ.
pieces of that could have happened, but anyway, so time-wise, there's just no way. Literally impossible. But on top of that, so he spent, of course, we talked about in Louisiana what happened. He was arrested in France. That's where he was caught. He was then transferred to Sweden, spent 4 months in what he'd called the nicest prison in the world.
Well, I mean, probably.
I mean, probably.
Yes, anything in Scandinavia.
I mean, anything furnished by IKEA. I mean, right? No?
I mean, probably.
It sounds nice.
I hope that they serve Swedish meatballs.
Every day. Like IKEA.
Just like IKEA.
Oh,
Let's go to IKEA.
We should.
Okay.
That's like
It's
a whole
a date.
day, though.
Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road. You're welcome.
So, I don't even know what we're talking about.
Well, you're talking about the fact that he did get arrested in the little village in France and then also in Sweden.
Right, okay, so he's arrested in Sweden, and this I think is what's kind of, somebody else noted this too, is so he got arrested in Sweden and served 4 months in Sweden for cashing about $1,200 in bad checks. The same thing he got 12 years for, or was supposed to get 12 years for, in Atlanta.
Right, U.S., Sweden, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, so there's,
Sure.
Yep, there we go, and that's all I need to say about that.
So he also escaped in Sweden then?
Well, obviously, he escaped to America, where he served. I mean, it varies. Some people say 2 years. It looks like 3.5 years of his 12-year sentence, until he was paroled and put into the custody of the FBI.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. That whole thing, too. I mean, that is kind of the whole arc, though. That is the redemption story. I want that to be true. We'll get to that later.
Oh, I was going to say, please tell me he works for the FBI.
We'll get to that later.
Oh, fuck!
All right, so along with his arrests are his escapes from capture. So in the movie, I think probably two of the most famous ones were he slipping through the toilet in the airplane.
In the airplane, right.
And then picking up a cab.
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing, which later on, everybody sort of pointed out to him that that's actually impossible. People that actually build airplanes and stuff like that. Like, we know that's not humanly possible. He's like, well, maybe I snuck out through the parlor.
Okay.
He's like, I don't know. And then the other sort of great escape was the escape that he did at the Miami airport in the movie by interviewing young co-eds at a local college and interviewing them to be stewardesses that can fly around the world with him. And he claimed in many of his lectures, too, that he spent like 4 months in Europe traveling with these women.
Okay.
That doesn't seem to be true.
Oh, my God.
But it does seem to be true that he attempted to do something like that. There are records of him going to Arizona State and the University of Arizona and conducting interviews as a former physician and current pilot looking for young women to travel the world with him. Of course, we'll be having to give examinations of all the women.
Oh my God, this guy's a fucking piece of shit.
Kinda, yeah. So, not even kinda. So, that was based on, there was an older student who went to the university who was a Pan Am pilot. He said, I didn't know anything was going on here. And he goes to this recruitment and meets Frank Abagnale. And yeah, he attested that, there was at least 12 young women who went there and did all their things. Oh, sad pants. It gets better. Well, I don't know if better is the right word.
Worse,
maybe. So he did do that. So again, this is like he uses his idea of, I mean, I think that he probably was trying to, so apparently he had this whole idea of going down to Brazil. That's where Sao Paulo, Brazil, and that's where he was going to get away, and that's where he was going to live forever. And I think that was probably his way to get down there, because this, of course, he's like 28 or 26 at this point when he's doing this. Not 19, as the movie suggests. All right, back to being paroled and working for the FBI after all of these exploits of traveling around the world and all the things. I think that's in question, too. Research has shown, and there's records of this, that while on parole, he faked being a furloughed pilot for Delta, and there were furloughs going on at the time.
Okay.
So this was...
He faked being a furloughed pilot.
Yeah, so he's got his uniform still, right?
Sure.
He's like, I'm furloughed. I want to work with kids at Camp Madison in near Houston, Texas. This is like 1974. And So somebody at the camp has a dad who's a pilot. He gets the job anyway. He goes there and he ends up getting fired for stealing a bunch of things. But he's working with kids again.
He steals from a kids camp?
Well, he's stealing from the counselors at the kids camp.
Oh my God. Okay.
Not the actual kids, but he's also around kids. And he's got sort of a history here of maybe not being Soup's cool. So anyway, so somebody has a father who's a pilot or is associated with pilots. So, there are a lot of furloughs going, but Delta's the only airline that actually didn't furlough anybody.
Oh my God.
So he chooses the one airline that didn't furlough anybody. So this man's brilliant. He has an IQ of over 140. He's actually spoken at Mensa meetings recently, like 2021.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
We're not checking IQs and actual intelligence. It's just a show. It's all good fun. Anyway, so he fakes his credentials, goes and works at the camp, gets fired. So after being fired from the camp, his parole officer is not happy with him. Not Soup's cool with faking being an airline pilot. I mean, literally why he was, all the things, right?
Well, he was furloughed. I mean,
hey now.
I'm not flying a plane. I'm furloughed right now.
Furloughed. Clearly, I'm not supposed to be flying. So he calls him up. He's so proud of himself. He calls to brag that he's in Houston still and that he got a job working at an orphanage.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm concerned about why he keeps gravitating towards children.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, but yeah. Okay. So he's working at an orphanage and he's actually placing children in families' homes.
Oh my God.
And his parole officer is like, you need a master's degree for that. Well, of course.
I'm a social worker.
He needed a master's degree or a PhD for everything he's ever done. So, I mean, he was able to get that. Like, seems easy at this point.
Christ.
Like a whole briefcase.
Let me look through my master's degrees.
Harvard, Cornell.
I have one that fits.
Professor at BYU. I mean, who knows? So he seriously. So strangely though, his parole officer actually worked at that orphanage before, knew exactly where it was, drove there, and was like, "What in the literal fuck are you doing? Not cool, man." So he's kind of at wit's end with him. So he moves him into his basically a mother-in-law. At his property. He's like, I got to keep tabs on you. I'm supposed to keep tabs on you.
His parole officer does this?
He's like, I can't.
Wow, that is done. Dedication.
Dedication.
Okay.
And that's all we know about the parole officer, but like, I've got my suspicions later about.
Oh.
Because, anyway, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So that's 1974. By 1975, he starts up his own business called Abagnale and Associates, still in business today, who, and his story is in 1975, he went to a bank and said, I can help you detect fraud. Here's all the ways to detect fraud. He made a little printout and he said, if you like what I tell you, pay me $50. If you and tell your other bank friends, tell them all about me. If not, if you don't like what it is, don't pay me a thing and I'll get out of your hair. And so he starts a business talking about his experience with fraud and writing bad checks and what to look for and how to educate the tellers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So by 1976, he meets his wife, Kellyanne Welbs, and they are later married. But so this is where we start to get to know Frank Abagnale in real life. So there's like these timelines, right? Movies, his story, all the things, all of which is fake because he was in jail all that time. Well, now here we are in the timeline that told you this is fun. So in the timeline there is real life. So we, as Americans, became aware of him when he first appeared in 1977 on a show called To Tell the Truth, which, of course, the movie opens with, where he is, to this day, the only person who's ever, where there's been 3 contestants who were all liars in that show. And so he parlays that into an appearance on Johnny Carson, the Kingmaker. And once Johnny Carson gets a hold of him, he's on Tom Brokaw. He's all over the place. He's giving lectures. Everybody loves his story. And I watched that first Johnny Carson episode, and he's even taken back by the response of the audience. So he's telling this story, this same story he's been telling for 40 years, and the audience is just eating it up.
Of course.
And I've watched Johnny Carson a lot throughout the years, but his reaction, he looks at the audience like, what the fuck? Like, you guys are like, you love this shit.
Jeez.
I mean, they're going wild for it. They just can't believe it. Everybody wants it to be true. So anyway, so that's 1977. By 1980, he finishes and releases his book, Catch Me If You Can. So he hooks up with author Stan Redding. to help him write his autobiography. And yeah, so that's kind of where we know him from. And so he's been telling that story of all of his exploits of traveling around the world since 1977. And yeah, at this point, he gives an estimated 50 to 100 lectures a year at $20,000+ a pop.
Fuck.
He has an estimated worth of over 20 million. He's claimed to have worked with nearly every Fortune 500 company over the last 40 years. He did help develop the super check and the super business check, which are supposedly the most secure checks. I say supposedly because I didn't do the research on it. They very well could be. Mm-hmm. The most secure checks out there for individuals and small businesses. He is, I think, interestingly, the spokesman for the AARP. So, and he's written now 4 books on fraud and fraud prevention. And yeah, that's all I got.
Fuck.
But so... Okay, what's your take?
I have several questions. One,
yes.
Did he work for the fucking FBI?
So I don't know. Okay, so he says that he's been lecturing at the FBI Academy for the last 30 or 40 years. That very well could be true and probably is.
Okay.
Or at least partly true. His oldest son, actually made it through the FBI Academy and is an FBI agent and a lawyer.
Wow.
Like for realsies.
Okay, I was like, has that been verified? Well, wow, yeah, I have so many...
So I don't know if he actually worked with the FBI, but he at least gives talks to the FBI. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like he's consulted with them. They never denied it. FBI agents certainly know who he is.
Yeah, of course. So he could be continuing to con about being a con.
No, I think that is the con. The whole thing is that he's probably done a little of these things, but I mean, to call himself... essentially, and write a book about himself, claiming to be the greatest con artist of all time, essentially. Mm-hmm. That's his shtick. And so the con is the con.
Right. So it's like, if you have managed to pull off a Steven Spielberg movie with Leonardo DiCaprio playing you are the greatest con man of all time. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I'm at. It's like, okay, so sure, all that's bullshit, but that's the con.
Yeah.
So we know what con is real. Is he's fucking rich.
Yes.
And he's living a fucking great life, and people still eat up his story, so...
Wow, that is nuts.
So yeah, he is the greatest con man.
That is so fucking nuts. Wow. Good for... You know what? Good for him, though.
Okay, good for him, but also, what the fuck with the creepy shit?
Yeah, so, that's really problematic. I don't love that. Don't be a fucking douche canoe to women, first of all.
Right.
Stop working with children.
Well, so in all due respect, nobody's ever filed any claims against him for sexual misconduct after all these years. Nobody's ever spoken up. Even Paula Parks, who spoke about him, there was nothing. Lots of interviews.
I am in no way implying that he has sexually or otherwise harmed a child. I was more thinking of, between pediatrician and camp counselor and social worker, that his customers, if you will, we know he's smarter than them.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe that's the shit.
He's outsmarting them, right? He's swindling children, and that's not fucking cool. Even if he hasn't harmed them, he is entrusting them. He is, I don't know. When someone's your pediatrician or your camp counselor, that's a fucking big deal when you're a little kid.
Yeah, well, I guess cool. So mostly he was hired to drive the buses.
Okay, well,
as a pilot.
He was more than qualified to do that.
And actually, one of the funny stories from that, too, is that the buses that he was driving were former corrections facilities buses with, the bars on the windows.
Stop it.
Fucking love that.
Okay, well, I also was going to say, I was really hoping that he did work in some capacity with the FBI, because I really do think that there should be more opportunities for former inmates to be employed in that way, because if anyone's going to have the inside scoop, it is going to be them.
Yeah.
And fuck. Wow.
Well, so in my mind, he did work for the FBI, as far as I'm concerned, because that's how I'm going to sleep at night and be happy.
Me too.
But so the con is the con, and that's what I was thinking going into, likely, that it doesn't really matter. So here's the thing, though. So you take away from the movie that, if you take away the idea that it's based on true events, that's a fucking great movie.
It's a fucking great movie.
That's fun. Mm-hmm. And if you say that you wrote that movie and this is my imagination and I know some shit. So if you want to pay me for the shit I know, then great. And you made a career out of that, then no harm, no foul.
Right.
But I think, as the author, Alan C. Logan, mentioned, there is some harm and there is some fouls. And, certainly Paula Parks and her family is one, but there are many others, of which too many to mention. But okay, so what about the leniency he got? Like over and over and over again.
I mean, I struggle with that one because, well, I would hope that there was at least restitution and that Paula's parents were reimbursed.
Sounds like it was.
And I would hope that even now, if he's doing lectures at $20,000 a pop.
Sure.
I mean, if I were him, I would be anonymously, dropping $5,000-10,000 in Paula's parents' mailbox every so often.
Or something.
He can't undo the harm of the trust issues that he caused, but I do, how I feel about the prison system. I don't think anybody should be in there unless literally they're so fucking batshit that the public is in serious danger if they're not.
Right.
So I don't feel any type of way about him not being behind bars. I feel some type of way about, I hope that they were reimbursed. I also think it would have been appropriate for him to not only reimburse the $1,200 or whatever it was that he took, but also pay for whatever therapy that they might have needed until they were done. Or, something like that to me is going to be the right thing to do, not just putting human beings in a cage, but that's my opinion.
So when we say that this is maybe kind of best case scenario of this situation, I mean, he found a way to make a life. He's actually, in spite of everything, has prevented a lot of fraud. He's actually helped a lot of people be more aware of how to protect themselves. He's kind of dedicated his life to that. And so he's done a lot of good. One of the stories he tells is, he told at that Google lecture, is that he will go down sometimes into his basement and not turn the TV on. And his children ask, why do you do that? And he says, well, just some things you can't forget. And he's referring to his time in the French prison, which is supposed to be one of the worst ones. It's like horrible, right? I honestly think that he's going down there worried that he's going to get caught. The whole thing's going to unravel. His entire life is going to unravel at some point because somebody digs too deep on all this stuff, and I think that's why he does that.
Yeah,
that's me. That's my take. That's my final take.
Yeah, I agree with you. Also, I think pretending to be a pilot and giving exams to potential Pan Am flight attendants is sexual assault.
But it depends on what the examination is too. I mean, you can do a once over, right?
If his hands are on their bodies and he is pretending that is necessary, that is sexual assault.
Absolutely. So
that's not fucking cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel conflicted.
Well, you've listened to me all week about, I'm back and forth on this guy.
Yeah.
And so now you know why.
Yeah. Wow. God.
Brutal. So my sources, Johnny Carson Show, To Tell the Truth, /film.com, wikipedia.com, Talks at Google, NPR's... WHYY.org did a great story. Podcast Most Notorious, interview with Alan C. Logan, the author of the Greatest Hoax on Earth book, the podcast Pretend, Abagnale.com, the movie Catch Me If You Can, and countless other lectures that he gave at universities and everywhere else. I mean, just dozens.
Wow.
Dozens and dozens. And it's all the same every time. It's like creepily the same every time. So anyway, so that's my story. That's all I got.
That was a good one, honey. Jesus Christ, I feel conflicted. What I was going to say at the top of the show was like, yes, we watched that movie together. And then what happened, which inevitably happens with you and I all the time, is we started to take a deep dive into all the pathology of Frank. I was like, no, save it for the podcast. But this is also a person who, like, you and I once had, like, an hour-long conversation about ketchup. Is it a sauce? Is it a condiment?
This is true.
So, yes, it's hard to be in the same house, and it's like, oh my God, I want to take a deep dive into this person. And then we watched the movie together, and I was like, oh my God, I have so many fucking questions. And we totally started to, like, debrief. And then it was like, no, save it for the podcast. But I'm glad we did, because, wow.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah, fucking good job. Woof.
Thank you.
Well, all right. Well, I filled up my wine, and I've got a chaos for you.
I'm excited.
Do you need more wine? Are you good?
I do need more wine.
Okay.
And I've got more wine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I decided to find some high school shenanigans story. You and I had a few misadventures in high school, but nothing like this. We did. Mostly I was an innocent...
Okay.
Okay. There was a few like, well, I'm stuck in this car and he's doing that.
Hey, yeah.
But you know what?
We're still alive.
We're still alive and here we are. Okay, so this is a local story also. So, but I'm going to take you to April 26, 1983 at Bethel High School in Spanaway, Washington. Okay?
I'm with you.
All right, you're with me? Mm-hmm. The 80s in high school. Fuck.
Well, I mean, great movies were made about the 80s.
Of course, yeah, all the best.
Best ever.
So, the school is holding their annual student government assembly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a big deal. Assemblies were a big deal in high school just in general because, you get out of class and then you're like with people that you're not normal. It's like a fucking, you remember that?
No, absolutely.
It's like a big deal.
Oh my God.
Ugh, the best days, right? So the students at this assembly, the purpose was that students were nominating one another for student government.
Okay.
So it kind of sounds, I don't know, like that's not how it was done when we were in school. Yeah. You nominate yourself and make your posters and campaign, but this was this was like people had their turn to get up in front of the whole school and say, I'm nominating this person and here's why.
Right.
How do you know that they want to be?
Free soda everybody every day at lunch.
So a bunch of students have speeches prepared, and they're they're teenagers. So there's witty jokes and like whatever. You know how teenagers are when they get a mic in front of their face. So any student that didn't want to attend had to go to study hall.
So everybody was there.
So everyone was there. So our friend Matthew Frazier was planning on nominating his friend Jeff Coleman for Associated Student Body Vice President.
All right.
Okay. He had written a speech.
So he didn't think he was good enough for president?
No. Vice.
Vice.
I like to, I want the accolades, but I want to just kind of chill in the background and not actually work.
All right, I got you.
I mean, fuck. I'm here for it. So, so he'd written a speech that he didn't spend a whole lot of time on, but he was a pretty good writer, pretty good student. He used a lot of metaphors and euphemisms to be clever in his speech. And he was a little nervous, but pretty confident. He's like, I've got this. So some of his teachers heard parts of his speech before the assembly, and they told him that it was inappropriate and that he should make some revisions because there could be consequences if he read that speech in front of the entire school.
All right. So this is a smart kid. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well-spoken, well-written.
Yep. And he wants his buddy Jeff to win.
Go Jeff.
Go Jeff.
Vote for Jeff.
But Matthew was like, this is fine. He didn't take the advice of his teachers. He felt comfortable with what he had written, so he forged ahead as planned. So there's roughly 600 students gathered in the gym for the assembly, and it's time for Matthew to deliver his speech. So he stood in front of all of his peers and started to tell them all about his good friend Jeff Coleman and why he would make the best student body vice president. Okay, so here's Matthew's speech. Quote, I know a man who is rock hard. He's firm in his pants. He's firm in his shirt. His character is firm, but most of all, his belief in you, the students of Bethel, is firm. Jeff Coleman is a man who takes his points and pounds it in. Stop. If necessary, he'll take an issue and nail it to the wall. He doesn't attack things in spurts. He drives hard, pushing and pushing until finally he succeeds. Jeff is a man who will go to the very end, even the climax for each and every one of you. So please vote for Jeff Coleman, as he'll never come between us and the best our school can be.
Shut the fuck up. I love this kid. So far, I love it.
You do?
Yeah. The confidence to get up there in front of 600 people and read that and just walk away. Like, there's no way in hell that I was doing that in high school.
No. Standing up and doing anything.
Standing in front of the class was like, I'd wet myself. I mean...
Do you remember when I sang the national anthem at the Martin Luther King Assembly?
Yes.
Oh, Okay. Yeah, it was bad. That song is hard to sing. I don't want to talk about it. Okay, so students in the audience, obviously, it's a bunch of teenagers. They're hooting and yelling and making hand gestures and mouth gestures, emulating the activities that Matthew was referring to in his speech.
Was this pre-practice? This coordinated? Is this like a, or just?
Okay. Nope. They're all just caught off guard and going with
fucking
it.
Loving it. All right.
So the teachers and the administrators were fucking pissed.
Yeah, I imagine why. But you know, like when your little kid swears, it's funny, right?
Yeah, these are teenagers.
But how many? There's got to be some teachers in the back of the assembly going,
loving it.
Just like, oh my
the
God.
younger teachers.
I don't care. Just
the gym teacher.
Somebody with a sense of humor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's hope.
So, yeah. 5 of the school officials wrote letters to the school administrators describing Matthew's speech and the disruption that it caused the assembly. And the next morning, Matthew was called down to the principal's office, and the vice principal, Christy Blair, showed him the 5 letters and asked him to explain himself. And Matthew was like, no thanks.
Pass.
No thanks, Christy. I'm good.
Appreciate the offer, but I'll pass.
He was like, yeah, that was my speech. I fucking nailed it. And she tells him that his innuendos are not acceptable at Bethel High.
Okay.
And that the rule book clearly states, quote, conduct which materially and substantially interferes with the educational process is prohibited, including the use of obscene or profane language or gestures.
So, I mean, he's just got to own it, though, right? I mean, we have 600 witnesses, 30-some-odd teachers. He just did the thing. He's like, yeah, so what? Like, expel me.
Well, he could do that, or he could be like, God, you're gross. I was saying that he's like a firm candidate.
True.
You're fucking disgusting, Christy.
Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about.
Nasty. That's not what I meant.
Double entendre my ass.
So, Christy goes on to tell him that it disrupted the assembly, and one teacher had to spend their entire class time discussing Matthew's speech, which interfered with the education.
But that is a damn shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the vice principal suspended Matthew for 3 days, and he was removed from the list of candidates for graduation speaker.
They had him on the list. Oh, dude, you know what? I think he shot his load too early.
I think so.
Right.
I think so too.
Because the graduation in front of all the parents.
That's the big one. That's the big one.
Dude. Wait,
but he's doing his friend Jeff Coleman a solid.
Well, you know, he's got dreams. He's got big plans.
He's got big plans.
Damn it.
I know. He blew his load too early. So Matthew is pissed and thought that the punishment was unfair. I mean, suspended for 3 days.
Okay.
No graduation speech. Okay.
Okay.
But of course, most of the students were in support of Matthew. They loved his speech.
Yeah. Matthew wins president. That's my guess.
He wasn't running. This was all for his friend. And of course, Jeff Coleman won by a landslide.
Well, you can't beat that.
He's firm.
Oh, yeah.
He's the firm choice. He's going to make the student body climax.
Jesus Christ.
So Matthew appeals his punishment through the school district. And the hearing officers who reviewed his appeal and his speech, they were like, you can't talk about climaxing at an assembly. Yeah. And they said that Matthew's speech was indecent, lewd, and offensive, and he violated the school rules.
As was clearly stated to him by the principal.
Christy.
Mm-hmm. Christy sometimes.
So he takes his suspension and he comes back after 3 days, but he's still pissed and he's not letting this go. So he decides to go to court, citing a violation of his free speech.
All right.
You're gonna.
I want to see where this goes next before I say a damn thing.
Okay. Well, the court sided with Matthew, and they said that the school did violate his right to free speech, and that the school's code of conduct was, quote, unconstitutionally vague.
Don't say this word. Well, so, I mean, it sounded like when Christine was describing what he was supposed to say, I mean, he sort of checked all the boxes, first of all.
Well, it said, conduct which materially and substantially interferes with the educational process.
Okay, so first of all, that's not the educational process. This is assembly. Mm-hmm. We're not there to learn. We're there to...
Well, and I would say the one teacher that fucking complained that said she had to have like a whole ass conversation with her class after the assembly is like, okay, so you were engaging the kids in a topic and throwing around different points of view. That sounds pretty educational.
Yeah, it sounds like an opportunity to... I mean, everything's an opportunity here. So I would agree that it is fairly vague.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay, so unconstitutionally vague, and that by removing his name from the list of commencement speakers, the district had violated his right to due process under the 14th Amendment, which states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Usually, due process refers to fair procedures. It first had to be clear that being removed as a commencement speaker was a possible punishment for Matthew. And that was not made clear.
Because he did have them review the story beforehand.
Yeah.
And at no point they said, okay, they did say you need to fix this and you shouldn't go up there. But they never made it clear that that's...
Yeah, and he's not objecting to the suspension. He's objecting to being removed as a commencement speaker because the potential punishment was not made aware to him. Therefore, his due process was violated.
Okay, well, I mean, outside of the court of law, due process, I mean... This is, okay, so how close is this? This is like a civil case, right? Mm-hmm. So is there due process in civil cases? No. I mean, there isn't, right? I mean, there's no due process.
Well, his case is a civil case because he's saying that they violated his constitutional rights.
Right, but you have to sign, well, at least when I was in high school, and I think my daughter as well, you have to sign at Bethel. By the way, my daughter went to this high school.
Really?
For a brief period
Oh
of
my
time.
God, that's so funny.
So, I'm sure she doesn't know this story, but she should.
She should. It's legendary.
Well, if it's not legendary, it will be now. So, but I mean, don't you have to sign like a code of conduct when going to any college or university?
Yes,
or
and
high
they're
school?
not arguing with the code of conduct. They're saying that the code of conduct was too vague. He's not even saying that if you want to call my speech conduct which materially and substantially interferes with the education process and I'm suspended for 3 days, fine. Mm-hmm. But you have revoked my opportunity to speak at the commencement ceremony, and that has violated my 14th Amendment rights.
Well, also, we could revoke that opportunity just because we don't like you or because of any other reason.
Right.
So, like
they can't just start freestyling rules.
Right, but also, like, that he's being presumptive that he even had a chance to speak in front of the...
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it wasn't like it was in the back. So if he had already been selected as a speaker for the graduation and they said, we are no longer going to allow you to do that, that's one thing. But you're going to be taken out of the running? Who knows if you actually ever were? Anyway, continue.
Well, if the students are voting, he for sure would, because Jeff Coleman won by a landslide. So, yeah, so the court awarded Matthew $278 and roughly $13,000 in attorney's fees and sided with him.
Okay.
And then his classmates did a write and vote for Matthew to be the graduation speaker, and he was able to give the speech at graduation. This is democracy. The voters have spoken.
Okay.
All right.
They allow it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the district was fucking pissed, so they appealed. Because, the consequences of this ruling would set a precedence that could mean total fucking anarchy at the school.
But how?
Because we've got the tail wagging the dog now.
Well, a little bit. I mean, okay, so a write-in ballot, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Sure.
I mean, that's still used today for presidential elections, for goodness sakes. Like, okay.
Yeah.
As you were.
Okay, so the ruling in this case came from case law, Tinker versus Des Moines, okay? Because you always have to cite case law when you are appealing or putting forth your argument. You're citing a precedence, right, that's been established. Okay. So they're trying to compare this to Tinker versus Des Moines. In this case, students in Des Moines, Iowa in 1965 wore black armbands to school to protest the Vietnam War. When the principal became aware of the plan, he warned the students that they would be suspended if they wore the armbands to school because the protest might cause a disruption in the learning environment.
Okay.
And during their suspension, the students and the parents sued the school district for violating their children's rights to free speech. And the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Iowa sided with the school's position, ruling that wearing the armbands could disrupt learning.
So that was Soup's helpful in his argument.
And then the students appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Oh.
Uh-huh. And the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that public school officials cannot censor students' expressions unless they can reasonably forecast that the speech will substantially disrupt school activities or invade the rights of others, and that students don't lose their right to free speech just because they have walked onto school property.
Except that you... Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole signing of the code of conduct thing, and I'm sure that they're much more clear now that you can't use lewd language or insinuate things that are bad and blah, blah,
It's
blah.
constitutionally vague, Michael.
Well, at that point it was. But I mean, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So you still love this kid.
I love this kid too. So, and the school officials must be able to show that their action was caused by more than a mere desire to avoid the discomfort and unpleasantness that always accompanies an unpopular viewpoint. So in other words, is the school trying to censor progressive thinking? Is it really that they're that they think there's a disruption to the education, or are they trying to censor progressive thinking? We're still talking about the black armbands in the Vietnam War. And
right, that makes sense.
Right? So Matthew's attorneys heavily relied on the Tinker versus Des Moines case to make their argument. And the school district attorneys were like, I'm sorry, but a black armband and you talking about your fucking hard friend climaxing are not the same thing. Right?
All right.
Okay. But the court sided with Matthew. They said that giving the school district the discretion to decide what is decent would, quote, increase the risk of cementing white middle-class standards for determining what is acceptable and proper speech and behavior in a public school.
I agree.
I agree, too. Oh, look at us.
Look at us.
Well, there's nothing to fucking talk about if we both agree.
As you were.
Carry on. Our wayward son. So, the district takes...
Finally, the first goddamn musical reference this whole time. I mean...
So, the district takes their appeal, Matthew's appeal, to the U.S. Supreme Court. And by this time, Matthew's already in college at UC Berkeley. This is still going on.
I love that he made it to UC Berkeley, and I wonder how much of this fight... Okay, so if you're UC Berkeley and you see this on his resume, like, okay, so this kid could be a fucking problem.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, yeah, but I love it. But it's Berkeley, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, he went to the perfect place. But
yeah.
Also, like, so do you think his fame from this case got him into Berkeley? Or do you think, because they were afraid that fuck it, you don't let me in, I'll sue you.
Well, I think the fact that he is a student and taking a school district punishment to court shows that he is pretty fucking intelligent, and that's probably what got him into Berkeley.
Probably.
Right?
Also, you like stick jokes. I mean,
he's reticent. He is not fucking backing down from...
why would you? I mean,
no.
Fucking double down.
He's fucking double.
So he's at Berkeley.
He's always at Berkeley. And in a 7-2 vote, the Supreme Court was like, what the fuck? This is not at all like the Tinker case. So this is the district appealing to the Supreme Court after Matthew won. Matthew won his appeal to the district at the district court level. And then the district took it to the Supreme Court level.
Aren't there some steps between there?
No.
Okay, perfect.
So Matthew's attorneys were citing the Tinker case, the Vietnam case, as being same, and district court was like, yeah, it's fucking same, and they overturned his punishment. And then the school district was like, fuck no, and they take it to the Supreme Court, and they're like, this is what has happened. And the Supreme Court was like, what the fuck? This is not at all like the Tinker case. There were 600 other kids in the room hearing Matthew's messages about his hard friend running for VP. Some of these kids were, 14-year-olds.
That had got sex education by the time they were 8 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
Okay,
it absolutely was disruptive to the other students.
yeah, okay.
And it's absolutely expected that a school would punish students for vulgar and offensive language.
If it's in their code of conduct.
Mm-hmm. And so the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the district.
But was it in their code of conduct that he signed at the beginning of the year?
I think they probably had to rewrite that. I think it was soups vague, but the Supreme Court, and that's the final appeal. When the Supreme Court rules, you're fucking done. So Matthew lost.
Who cares?
But at this point, he's at UC Berkeley, and he's moved on. And anyway,
yeah.
In 2001, Matthew was interviewed about his legal debacle, and at the time, he was a debate coach at Stanford, and he said the Supreme Court got it all wrong, and that the candidate speeches should be protected.
I agree with him.
You agree?
Well, I do. So I think I'm in the Supreme Court right now. Of all things. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So first of all, I agree with the district court as a lawyer. I'm going to play lawyer right now.
Perfect.
So I agree with the district court that actually, even without the Tinker case, I think that the case itself stands on its own, that he should have the right to free speech as a young adult or any age, and that should not go away while you're on school grounds, unless that you are signing an agreement not to act in any given way while on campus. And it sounds like at that point it was soups vague, and I don't think that they were necessarily needing the Tinker case to support the decision. Now, the fact that the Supreme Court separated the two and broke it apart and said, this is nothing like this, and then you're way wrong, so fuck off. First of all, okay, going back a little bit, why did it go all the way to who cares about some dick jokes at a high school? Why did the school district even appeal? Why did it go to the Supreme Court? Why does that matter?
Because they were afraid about the precedents that it would set and that they would lose total control over their students.
Anarchy. It's 1983. Mm-hmm. Last week we just learned that we were almost nuclear annihilated in 1983. They're concerned in Bethel High School that this...
In Spanaway.
You just go to the Supreme Court, take up the time of our nation's foremost judges to talk about dick jokes.
I mean, if I was an administrator at Bethel, I would have taken my lumps and then rewritten very specific code of conducts.
That's as far as it goes. I mean, really. Hey, Matt got $280.
Well, and people should be concerned that obviously a school district, like, these are taxpayer dollars that are being used to appeal to the fucking Supreme Court level because of an assembly and a speech with sexual innuendos.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Now, so interestingly, Bethel High School is down there by JBLM, so a lot of military families. So I wonder what role that played. Was Matthew a military child?
I don't know.
Because...
Not a very liberal area, is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know that it's so much even liberal, but I mean, we have people that are in the government system, like legitimately. You know, people know people.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering what role that played, because there are people that are stationed there, and that's the high school they go to.
Yeah,
that's the high school. So
totally.
I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. There's no way to know.
There's no way to know, except that, I mean, that Tinker case was in fucking Iowa.
The 65 civil rights case.
And I can understand that wasn't a good case law to cite. Like, the students there quietly wore armbands, which could have meant nothing. You know, it was only that the officials got wind of what it meant that it became a problem.
Right, but again...
It could have been fucking Twin Day, and they didn't know.
Yeah, but damn it.
Could have been like a student-organized Twin Day.
So, all right, earlier you said that it was potentially disruptive to the students and their education, right?
It said, quote, conduct which materially and substantially interferes with the educational process is prohibited, including the use of obscene or profane language or gestures.
Okay, so going back to, was it the district that said, all right, why does it even matter? That's what I want to know.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. I've had a lot of wine. Yes, 14-year-olds have had, well, I don't know, it's 1983. I don't know if anyone's had any sex education, but even today, when sex education is being put on the table, parents have an opportunity to opt out. If they have religious perspectives or otherwise, whether we agree with that or disagree with that is neither here nor there. The fact is there were 14-year-olds who maybe had never heard anything like that before in their life, who were not given that was why I pointed out that students who didn't want to attend had the option to go to study hall, and parents and students should have had the right to know ahead of time, this will be a PG-13 rated assembly and I want my kid in study hall. And they weren't given that opportunity.
Will they ever? That's just not the way the world works. But
it should at school, though.
So, no. I think with the sexual education part, yes. But, when you're in high school, and who knows what some kid's going to say? Who knows what you're going to say when you're walking down the hallway? I
think the problem was that this was an official school event, no different than being in the classroom.
Okay, so parent hat. You're going to put the parent hat on. Mm-hmm. You're kids in high school. Mm-hmm. They're in an assembly. This is what's said. What's your reaction?
Me personally as a parent, I don't care. Yeah. But
are you rooting for Matt?
I think...
Is Matt coming over for dinner?
Listen, I think that Matt showed a lot of courage. I think Matt knows how to play to his audience. It obviously worked. Jeff Coleman won by a landslide. Mm-hmm. I think that he violated the school rules, though. I think the school rules were poorly written. And unfortunately, it sometimes takes a violation before you realize that they are poorly written. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what the structure... Well, 14-year-olds, those are ninth graders. There were assemblies when we were in high school, and I don't know, I didn't take a deep enough dive, where, if your kid's giving a speech, your mom's coming, and also my 3- and 4-year-old sister is there.
Do we have the speech from the graduation commencement speech? Do we have that?
No. I wish I did. But I don't. But do you know what I'm saying?
So everybody's expecting him to just go balls to the wall. Mm-hmm. I want to hear that speech. I bet you it's
I bet I could find it.
Everybody's at the edge of their seats waiting for some crazy shit and it never happens.
But you know what I mean? It's high school students, but there were lots of things where it's oh, my kid's giving a speech today, so I'm going to go to the assembly and watch as a parent, and I have my toddlers in tow, or I have my 5-year-old in tow. That's not fucking cool.
Sure, but is the toddler or 5-year-old going to...
I have my 10-year-old in tow.
I don't care. They're double entendres. You got to know what they're talking about.
Okay, if you have to show ID to get into an R-rated movie, if this was in a movie, it would have been R-rated. And there were people in that audience who did not... Sure? Where I'm going to give Matthew kudos is that his innuendos were good enough that I'm sure the conversation with Christy was what are you talking about? I'm saying he's a firm, you know what I mean? I'm saying he's a firm candidate. Yeah. You perv. Yeah.
Head out of the gutter there, Christine.
Yeah.
Just a young boy.
Oh my God. So anyway, that's my fucking chaos.
I love it.
Thank you.
Fucking chaos. I can't, being at that assembly... And,
oh my God, the 80s.
Oh my God.
My sources were famoustrials.com, the cornelllaw.edu, the Let's Go to Court podcast, uscourts.gov, Wikipedia, mtsu.edu.
Nice.
Thank you. Yeah.
Excellent story.
Thank you.
Local too, and I love that.
Local.
Yeah,
high school, taking it back a little.
Know that?
I didn't know, yeah. Well, do you have anything else for the good of the order?
That's all I've got.
That's all I've got too. This was motherfucking... first off, I fucking love you.
Oh, I love you.
I love you.
You're the best.
You're the best. Thank you for being my co-host.
You're welcome. Excited to hear Erica come back next week.
Yeah.
Episode number 100.
100. That's
100.
a big...
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's a milestone.
A pre-congratulations.
Thank you.
You know what won't be chaotic?
What? Okay. Well, this was motherfucking chaotic. Chaotic. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Crime, Wine, and Chaos. Artwork by Erica Peterson. Music by Paul Abner. Audio editing by Amber Clifton. We are on Facebook at Crime, Wine, and Chaos and on Instagram at Crime, Wine, and Chaos Pod. If you would like to support the show or submit a listener story, you can visit our website at crimewineandchaos.com for our Patreon link and listener story submission. Cheers!